All right, scholars, I hope you enjoyed learning about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the battle at Fort Wagner. Um, Exciting to see that African Americans were finally allowed to fight in the Civil War. At first, Lincoln denies African Americans able to join the war. He says this is the white man's war. And he also did that because he wanted the South to know that this war was not about ending slavery, but about uniting the states back together and keeping the United States from falling apart. But then after Battle of Gettysburg, with that Gettysburg Address, the war is now going to be about ending slavery. And Lincoln says we have all of these soldiers, we have all of these men that we could, these African Americans that want to fight that we can use on the battlefield. And a lot of them are going to be runaway slaves. So at first, they are not paid equally as their white counterparts, but eventually that will change. But unfortunately, they were not as well trained, and they were given like older equipment. So let's go ahead and we're going to move on now with the war. We're going to be finishing up the war right now. And we're going to be learning about Union General George Sherman and his march through Georgia. Sherman marched his army across the state of Georgia toward Savannah after he burned Atlanta down. He promised to make Georgia howl. Now he was going to destroy the last untouched supply base for the Confederacy. Sherman's troops destroyed everything of value that they found as they marched through Georgia. They trampled or burned fields. They stripped houses of their valuables and burned supplies of hay and food. Dead horses, hogs, and cattle that his troops could not eat or carry away lined the roads. The troops destroyed everything useful in a 60-mile wide path. This was a strategy that was later used in future wars, and this is known as total war, when you not only are including the military or army that you're fighting in these battles, but now you're attacking citizens like property. So this is now everyone is feeling the war. The war is no longer just on the battlefield. The war is brought to your doorstep. If we look up here in the top right, we can see a picture of part of Atlanta that George Sherman. You can see they tear up the railroad tracks so trains can't run on them anymore. And you can see like this was a building that they burned down. You can see kind of the structure and columns. So they're going to burn George Sherman. If you guys follow me right here, he's going to leave Chattanooga and he's just going to head towards the ocean and everything. He's going to burn everything here. He's going to burn Atlanta, all this part of Georgia. If you go there today, not a single building is from before 1865 because they all burned down. So Sherman is going to destroy Georgia and then eventually going to continue up all the way to North Carolina. All right, let's continue. So in December 1864, Sherman captured Savannah, Georgia, and then from there he turned north and destroyed all opposition in the Carolinas. His troops marched 425 miles in just 50 days, which is insane. Finally, he reached Raleigh, North Carolina by March 1865. There he waited for Grant's final attack on Richmond. So General Sherman is going to capture Savannah, which is right here. And he's going to call Abraham Lincoln and says, hey, I got a Christmas gift for you. The city of Savannah is yours. So kind of an interesting telegraph. So I guess not a phone call, but a telegraph. Capturing Savannah and giving it to Lincoln as a Christmas gift. So it looks like at this point, after Sherman has marched to the seat of Savannah, the war is looking like it's over. And my roommate just walked in, who's from Georgia, and they do not like that name Sherman. Triggered. All right, let's continue. The war ends. So Grant's forces are going to batter Lee's army at Petersburg for 9 months. And Petersburg was the gateway to Richmond. If y'all remember that third step of the Anaconda Plan, go ahead and put it in the chat or answer right here. What was that third step of the Anaconda Plan? So Union forces are going to finally break through Confederate lines. They're going to capture the capital of Richmond on April 1st, 1865. And then Union troops are marched into Richmond 2 days later. One thing to note, the Confederacy did not want the North to be able to use all of the factories and all of the goods that were in Richmond. So the Richmonders are actually going to burn their own city to the ground. So they're going to burn all of Richmond to the ground. Again, all of the buildings in Richmond, for the most part, there are some outside of the city, but in Richmond proper, there are no buildings that were built before 1865 because they were all burned down. All right, let's continue. Grant's soldiers moved quickly to surround Lee's army, and Lee told his officers, hey, there's nothing left for me to do but go and see General Grant. I would rather die 1,000 deaths, but looks like we lost. So General Lee, in a fully dressed uniform, arrived at Wilmer McLean's house in the village of Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865. He was there to surrender his army to General Grant, and Grant met him in a mud-splattered and crumpled uniform. And this is interesting because it really shows their character. General Lee was a very clean-cut, wholesome guy. Saw that as like a real sign of respect. And then you have General Grant coming in here with like all wrinkled uniform. It has mud all over it, right? So kind of really told about their personalities. And I included Wilmer McLean in here because the crazy thing is the very first battle of the Civil War, which was the Battle of Manassas, Bull Run, took place on Wilmer McLean's front yard. And he's going to, after that battle, he's going to sell the property and leave because he wanted to get his family away from the war. But sure enough, fate finds him, and the war is going to end in his backyard on the back porch when Robert E. Lee signs the surrender terms to General Grant. So Wilmer McLean can say that the Civil War began in his front yard and it ended in his backyard. One of the crazy things, crazy facts about the Civil War. All right, let's continue. All right, advisors, you're going to pause me here, and I want you to call on 5 scholars to read out our bullet points. Go ahead and pause me. All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and we're going to continue reading about the terms of surrender and the effects of the Civil War. So Grant's terms of surrender were generous. They allowed Confederate soldiers to go home if they promised to stop fighting. He allowed the soldiers to return home with their own horses and mules that they would need for spring plowing, right? Because a lot of these people own farms. And then officers were permitted to keep their swords and weapons. Grant ordered that food be sent to Lee's men who were starving. So Robert E. Lee is going to accept the terms as we see in this picture. So Lee returned to his headquarters, and then Union troops began to shoot their guns and cheer wildly. Grant told them to stop celebrating. The war is over, he said. The rebels are our countrymen again. So again, very interesting right here. So right, the North is starting to celebrate, and Grant is like, no, like we're not going to brag about this. The country now needs to heal. These rebels are Americans again, and we need to not be rubbing it into their faces. And so these Grant's terms of surrender were generous for a reason. He did so to heal the nation, right, to bring them together, because he knew that if the terms of surrender were very harsh, that it would make things more difficult and could lead to maybe another civil war or just more conflict down the road. The focus needed to be bring the country back together, heal the nation. All right, touched by fire. No one who fought in the Civil War would ever forget the intensity of the experience. In our youth, wrote Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., our hearts were touched by fire. So the nation had been touched by fire too. Many compared the Civil War to a great furnace that had burned away one country and then created a new one in its place. Slavery and the right to secession had any place in this new country. Just as Lincoln had said, the Union was a single whole, not a collection of sovereign states. Before the war, Americans tended to say the United States are. After the war, they said the United States is. So this is really important because it is true that after the Civil War, people are going to more identify with being an American than being from whatever state they are from. This is definitely more true for people who are living in the North than people who are living in the South. But this is where we start seeing people considering America as it is today, right? So unified states. All right, but these changes came at a horrifying cost. Billions of dollars have been spent on the conflict, and more than 620,000 Union and Confederate soldiers were dead. That's about 2% of the entire population. Thousands more came home missing an arm or a leg. 2/5 of livestock, that's like farm animals, were destroyed, and acres of cropland left in ruins. It would take generations for the South to recover from the war's destruction. Many historians have called the Civil War the first truly modern war, as it was the first war to reflect the technology of the Industrial Revolution, right? This was the first war that took place after the Industrial Revolution, but still using traditional war tactics like were used in the Revolutionary War. On top of that, they used railroads, the telegraph, armored ships, and more accurate and destructive weaponry. And the Civil War was also introduced to this new concept known as total war, which is now war between whole societies, right? Everybody, civilians included, not just uniformed armies, right? So the war is brought to your doorstep. And the Civil War still left many issues unsettled. The old society of the South had been completely destroyed, right? Slavery is now illegal in all of the United States, but the memory of it lingered. Thousands of white Southerners clung to a romantic picture of the pre-war South. Decaying plantation houses became shrines, and a lot of them are still are today. You can go visit them. And the many in the South would try to recreate their way of life in the years that followed, as we're going to be learning next week. Secession and slavery were gone, but conflicts over states' rights and the status of African Americans would continue long into the future, and still do today. Alrighty, advisors, go ahead and pause me here. I want you to call on about 5 to 6 scholars to read out our recap slides. Y'all can go ahead and pause me here. Alrighty, scholars, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Civil War. Like I said previously, usually I'm able to get a little bit more into the battles and talk about some of the generals and important people, but unfortunately with the new curriculum and the schedule this year, I was only able to have a couple days. But luckily for you, there are tons of resources that you can go and find on YouTube and on the internet to learn more about the Civil War. And of course on Sora as well. All right, y'all are going to head on over to Google Classroom. You're going to complete cycle 2 of your classwork. You're going to have 5 minutes, and I will see y'all back here on Monday as we're going to get into Reconstruction.